The day my mother-in-law tried to humiliate me in front of everyone, she did not know one thing. The house she was standing in, the life she was bragging about, the family's comfort, their pride, their name. It was all being quietly held up by the woman she kept calling useless. Me. And by the end of that night, I did not cry. I did not beg. I did not argue. I simply told the truth. My name is Mira, and this is the day I broke free from a life that had been built on my silence. When I married Arjun, I believed I was walking into a new home. I thought I would be welcomed with warmth, maybe even respect. I was wrong. From the first week itself, my mother-in-law, Shanta, made it clear that in her house, I was not a daughter. I was a servant with a wedding ring. Every morning she would look at me and say things like, "A woman's real job is to adjust," or "Career makes women arrogant," or "A good daughter-in-law does not think about money. She thinks about family." She said these things with a smile, but her words were sharp enough to cut. At first, I stayed quiet. I told myself she needed time. I told myself respect would come later. I told myself every family had a difficult elder. So I woke up early. I cooked. I cleaned. I helped her with every little thing. I smiled when she criticized my clothes. I stayed calm when she mocked my job. I swallowed my pride when she compared me to other women. Because I wanted peace. Because I loved Arjun. And because I still believed if I worked hard enough, she would eventually see me. But people like Shanta do not change because you are kind. They only become more comfortable hurting you. Every evening, she had something new to say. "Why do you need to work? Arjun earns enough. Career-minded women forget how to take care of a home. You should be grateful someone like my son married you. You come from a middle-class background, Mira. Do not act too ambitious." She loved to say that word ambitious as if it was a sin. But inside me, something was quietly growing. Not anger, not revenge. Something stronger. A decision. I decided that if I was going to be treated like I had no value, then I would build value so strong no one could deny it. I started small, very small. I never announced anything. I never asked permission. I simply began. At night, after everyone in the house slept, I opened my laptop and worked. I'd always been good with numbers and digital marketing. Before marriage, I had freelanced a little. After marriage, I had stopped taking serious projects because I thought my new home would require my full attention. But now I understood something painful. If I depended only on their approval, I would never be free. So I went back to work. I accepted projects through hidden clients. I learned new skills. I studied late into the night. I took on small business accounts. I helped brands with strategy, social media, ad management, and content planning. Sometimes I worked until 2 a.m., then woke up at 5:30 a.m. to make breakfast before anyone else came out of their room. I was exhausted, but every payment I received felt like a breath. It felt like I was building a secret door out of a cage. I never told Shanta. I never told Arjun at first either. Not because I was ashamed, because I knew exactly how they would react. Shanta would call it disrespect. Arjun would probably tell me to wait until things calm down. But life does not wait, and freedom does not come from waiting. It comes from building. So I opened a separate bank account. I started saving every rupee I could. I tracked every expense. I studied the family's financial habits. I noticed who paid which bills. I noticed which accounts were running low. I noticed how often Shanta pretended to know everything, while the actual payments were delayed behind the scenes. The more I looked, the more I saw. Their life looked rich from the outside, but inside, it was held together by borrowed stability, unpaid balance sheets, and one invisible truth. My income was quietly covering the gaps. Not all of it at first, but more and more as time passed. There were months when Arjun's business income dipped. There were months when Shanta insisted on keeping up appearances. There were expensive groceries, festival gifts, utility bills, family event payments, emergency repairs, and small temporary loans that never seemed to be temporary. And who made sure nothing collapsed? Me. I paid the electric bill. I covered a supplier payment. I helped with a family function. I bought the gifts Shanta wanted to present as her own arrangement. I paid for maintenance when the old car broke down. I even helped with a portion of the home loan during a rough month, though no one thanked me. No one even knew, and maybe that was my mistake. Or maybe that was my protection. Because while they enjoyed the comfort, they still looked at me like I was some burden. Shanta kept saying, "Mira, you need to learn your place. My place." I wanted to laugh. My place was the one keeping this house from falling apart. My place was the silent foundation under their loud pride. But I stayed quiet. I stayed calm. I stayed careful. Then came the festival. It was the biggest family gathering of the year. Relatives from both sides were coming. The house was decorated. The kitchen was full. Lights were being hung. A special dinner was being prepared. Everyone was dressed in bright clothes, and Shanta was shining with confidence. This was her moment. Or so she thought. For days, she had been acting strangely sweet toward me. Too sweet. That is how I knew something was coming. She asked me to make a special dish. She asked me to wear a traditional outfit. She asked me to stand with the family for photos. Then, in front of everyone, she said, "This festival will show who really belongs in this house." I smiled politely, but inside, I already knew. She was planning to humiliate me. That evening, the living room was filled with guests. Laughter moved through the air. Music played softly in the background. The smell of food and incense mixed together. People were complimenting the decorations, the food, the house, the arrangements. Shanta sat at the center, like a queen. Arjun stood beside her, smiling awkwardly, not realizing the storm that was about to begin. Then Shanta raised her glass, and with that fake, polite smile of hers, she said, "Before we begin, I want to say something important. In our home, we believe in family values, in sacrifice, in respect. Not everyone here understands that." Several relatives turned toward me. I knew what was happening. She continued, "Some people today think a job makes them independent. They forget that a woman's true strength is in supporting her husband and his family. A home does not run on pride. It runs on duty." The room went quieter. Then she looked directly at me. "Mira," she said, "you have been living here for years. I hope by now you understand that this family did not build itself by outside influence. We built this with our own effort." Her words were not just for me. They were for the audience. She wanted me embarrassed, small, silent. She wanted the guests to think I was some selfish woman who contributed nothing. I could feel my heartbeat rise. But I did not panic, because I had spent months preparing for this exact moment. I stood up calmly. Everyone looked at me. Shanta's eyes narrowed a little, like she thought I was about to apologize. I did not. Instead, I took my phone out, and I said, "You are right, Shanta. A home does not run on pride. It runs on facts." The room went still. Arjun looked confused. The relatives looked curious. Shanta's smile froze. I continued, "For the last several years, this family has been enjoying the comfort of a life that was quietly supported by my work. Since no one here seems interested in honesty, I think tonight is a good time to show it." Shanta's face changed. I opened the first document, then the second, then the third. Bank transfers, bill payments, project invoices, loan support, utility receipts, property maintenance payments, event expenses. Everything, neatly organized, clearly labeled. No emotion, just proof. I said, "Here is the truth. When the business had a weak quarter, I covered the gap. When the home expenses became too much, I paid them. When the old house needed repairs, I handled the cost. When family events were arranged, my money was part of the arrangement. When this house kept running, it was not because everyone here was doing so well. It was because I was quietly holding the pieces together. The room was completely silent now. You could hear the ceiling fan. Shanta's lips parted, but no words came out. I looked straight at her and said, "You called me career-minded as if that was shameful. But that career is exactly what kept your pride alive. You called me ambitious. Yes, I am ambitious. Because I never wanted to live my life depending on humiliation." A few relatives shifted uncomfortably. One aunt covered her mouth. One uncle stared at the floor. Arjun's expression had changed completely. For the first time, he was seeing something he should have seen long ago. I turned to him. "Arjun," I said softly, "I loved you enough to protect your dignity. I loved this family enough to stay quiet while they insulted me. I worked while being called lazy. I paid while being called useless. I stood here and let your mother speak to me like I was below her, because I believed marriage meant patience. But patience is not the same as self-destruction." He looked like he wanted to speak. I did not let him. I held up my hand and said, "No, let me finish." Then I turned back to the entire room. Tonight, I do not want applause. I do not want sympathy. I do not want excuses. I only want the truth to be heard once, clearly, before I leave this house. Shanta finally found her voice. She said sharply, "Mira, this is not the time for drama." I almost smiled. Drama. After years of cruelty, after years of belittling me, after years of feeding on my silence, she had the nerve to call this drama. I looked at her and said, "No, Shanta. Drama is pretending you built everything yourself while another woman silently carried the cost." Her face hardened. She stood up. "Do not speak to me like that," she said. And that is when something inside me became very calm, very clear. I had crossed the line of fear. I said, "You spent years speaking to me about my career, my clothes, my habits, my worth, my place. You thought I would stay forever because I was quiet. But quiet does not mean weak. It means I was learning, listening, observing, preparing." I reached into my bag and placed one more envelope on the table. The house maintenance records, the loan support history, the festival budget, the emergency payments. Then I said, "Take a look. Not one rupee here is imaginary. No one touched the papers, but everyone was looking. That is the power of truth. It does not need to shout. It only needs to arrive." Shanta's face had turned pale. She looked around the room for support, but the guests had gone silent. Even the people who used to nod along with her could not meet my eyes now. I continued, "I did not come here tonight to beg for respect. I came here to return the weight you made me carry alone." Then I took off my ring. The sound was small, but in that quiet room it felt loud. I placed the ring gently on the table and said, "I am done." Arjun finally stepped forward. "Mira, please," he said. "Let's talk privately." I looked at him, and for a moment I saw the man I had once loved. But I also saw the man who had watched me suffer and stayed silent because silence was easier than standing up to his mother. I asked him, "Why privately?" He did not answer. I said, "Because in private, I would have to soften my pain again. I would have to listen to explanations. I would have to pretend being hurt less than I was. But this is not a misunderstanding, Arjun. This is a pattern." He lowered his eyes, and that told me everything I needed to know. I turned to Shanta one last time. "You taught me for years that a woman should know her place. So let me teach you something you never learned. A woman who earns her own life does not have to stay where she is mistreated." Then I picked up my purse, turned toward the door, and walked out. No shouting, no tears, no begging, just footsteps. Each step felt heavier than the last, but also lighter. Because with every step, I was leaving behind a life where I had been made to feel small. Outside, the night air was cool. The sounds of the festival were still faintly behind me. Inside that house, the truth had landed like a thunderclap, and for the first time in years I could breathe. I did not have a grand plan that night. I did not know exactly what tomorrow would bring, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was no longer going to survive inside someone else's control. Over the next few days, the calls started. Arjun called first, then Shanta, then relatives. Then people who had once stayed silent suddenly wanted to resolve the matter. But I was no longer interested in solutions that only existed to protect their comfort. I moved out. I stayed with a friend for a while. Then I rented my own place. Small, quiet, simple. But mine. Every corner of that space felt like fresh air. No one criticized how I spent money. No one watched what time I came home. No one insulted my work. No one told me I was too ambitious. I woke up every morning and drank tea in peace. And that peace was worth more than the fake respect I had been given in that house. Later, I learned that the relatives who had once praised Shanta started asking questions. Questions about the money, about the bills, about the house, about who had really been keeping things afloat. And slowly, the story changed. Not because I shouted the loudest, but because truth has a way of surviving. Eventually, Arjun came to see me. He looked tired, older somehow, sad. He said, "I should have stood by you." I listened. He said, "I was wrong." I believed he meant it. But apology does not erase years, and regret does not rebuild trust on its own. I told him, "You were not just absent, Arjun. You were present and still silent. That hurt more." He cried. I did not. Not because I had no pain left. Because I had already cried enough in the years before. Sometimes healing looks like tears. Sometimes healing looks like no longer offering your wounds to the same hands that caused them. I filed for separation, not out of hatred, out of self-respect. And when it was done, I felt something deep inside me settle. Not joy, not revenge, just peace. The kind of peace that comes when you finally stop shrinking yourself to fit someone else's pride. Today, I still work. I still build. I still save. But now I do it for myself. I invest in my future. I pay for my own life. I support my own dreams. And when I look in the mirror, I no longer see a woman who endured too much. I see a woman who survived, learned, and walked away strong. I used to think leaving meant losing. Now I know leaving can also mean reclaiming everything. So if you are watching this, and you have been made to feel small in your own home, listen to me carefully. Do not let anyone confuse your silence with weakness. Do not let anyone mistake your patience for helplessness. Do not let anyone tell you that your hard work does not matter just because they did not notice it. Build your own door. Build your own exit. Build your own life if you have to. Because one day, the people who laughed at your struggle may discover that you were the one holding everything together all along. And when that day comes, you do not need to scream. You only need to stand up. That is exactly what I did. And that is why, on the day they planned to shame me, I became the woman they could no longer control. The woman they called worthless walked out with her dignity. And the woman they underestimated became the reason they could no longer pretend. If you want, I can also turn this into a more dramatic YouTube voiceover version with scene breaks, pauses, and emotional punchlines.